this is Angel Kraus, and this is a review of Module C, Step 3.1. At this point, you have already viewed the Module C overview video and also the video on the IIP, and you will have needed to completed cells 1 through 6 on the IIP in order to move on to working on your essential components for instruction or your unit outline. The C2 document really helps you structure your unit. So once again, your focus question, your focus topic will need to be embedded into this unit. So if your focus question is on a math strategy or a math skill that you're developing in your students, your essential components for instruction will be a math unit. If you're looking at persuasive writing, or if you're looking at something like that, it'll be very focused. If you're looking at something broader like critical thinking can take place in any sort of a unit. So it may be embedded in your math unit, or it may be embedded in a science unit. If you're looking at classroom management, the same thing for that. That the classroom management that you're measuring could be embedded in any type of unit. So your essential components for instruction is actually guided by what your focus is for your IIP. So it's just a 2-page document, but it should expand as you write in it. And so you'll just kind of fill in all of the different information. What is your content area or beginning date, anticipated number of lessons, your content standards, and what are the learning objectives. So just to make a note in the formatting, you'll see that there's a copy of the academic content standards being addressed here. Here you are required to use the Common Core state standards, so make sure that you have the Common Core state standards in here, even if your school does not utilize those. If your school utilizes their own standards, you can add those in, but it is required to have the Common Core state standards right here. So make sure you have the CCSS listed there. This second question is still just a part of number 1. How will students be helped to connect to real life applications? So depending on what standards you've chosen, start beginning about how are they going to connect to real life within those standards. So what about the standards really lends itself to real life application? Okay. The learning objectives would be stated in student-friendly terms. Students will be able to define, students will be able to argue, students will analyze, students will develop. Okay, so the words that we want to stay away from here is that students will learn or students will understand. What are they going to be doing as they learn or as they understand? What will they be able to do by the end of your unit? So writing your learning objectives here. And then how are you going to communicate those goals to the students or to the families or both? Within the unit, you'll develop an entry-level assessment to get an idea of where your students are as they begin the unit. It can be any type of assessment that you want. It could be a quick write, it could be tests that your district or your school already administers that you have access to. They could be performance assessments, any type of assessment that directly relates to the content standards and the learning objectives that they're trying to achieve. Again, this question is matched right with number 3 up here. How will that entry-level assessment be scored? Is it going to be scored out of points? Was there a rubric? Was there a guide? How are you going to score your students' results? So if it's a quick write, how do you know if they're meeting standards? If it's an essay that you're going to use as an entry-level, say an essay from a previous unit, what rubric was used to grade that essay or to assess that essay? So after you've determined what type of an entry-level assessment you want to use in your unit, start to think about, okay, if this is the entry level, what is the summative assessment that I want to use? And again, that summative assessment can take any form. It can be a presentation, it can be a traditional test, it can be an essay, it can be, a series of assignments, it can be a project. And so start to brainstorm what type of a summative assessment will you use in the end to determine if they have met the learning objectives for the unit. So here, now you're going to go back to that entry-level assessment and think about, if I'm giving this entry-level assessment, what knowledge, vocabulary, and or skills are needed to ensure that students to ensure student learning during this lesson series. So if you're thinking about, say if I'm doing a persuasive essay as my entry-level assessment, what are some basic skills that your students are going to need to know? They're going to need to know how to write an introduction, how to write body paragraphs, how to write a conclusion, or maybe if your goal is to get your students to write a full paragraph, you're going to have your topic sentences, and how would you do that? So list anything. When you're looking at that entry-level assessment, what types of skills, what types of vocabulary, what types of knowledge are they going to be need to know to be successful in this lesson series or in this unit? So what do we need to know? What are they going to need to be able to know, do, and demonstrate by the end of the unit? And then also, knowing that that's what they're going to need to be successful, think about, this is coming back to, based on the entry-level results, what progress monitoring assessments will be used during this lesson series. So when you get the results of that lesson, of the entry level, what are some things that you know that you can support them throughout? So progress monitoring assessments are going to be, how are you assessing them on a day-to-day basis? Every lesson that you give has some sort of progress monitoring assessment. It might be a quick write, it might be a show of hands, it might be a little group activity that you do, it might be a quick quiz, it might be verbal communication with the students. So what are some good progress monitoring assessments that will get your students to where they need to go by the end? Number 7, you take a look at how might key understandings from the action plan be linked to this series. So this is taking a look at your research, and here you have cells 5 through 8. So what you found in your research, say if you found this great strategy, list here how you might apply it. Say if you saw a video where a teacher tried to incorporate this certain strategy or procedure, list that here. So start to envision, I've done this research in my action plan. How is that now going to become a part of my unit? Okay. Number 8 is what materials are you going to need? Is there anything specific that you're going to need for the lesson series? And you might have to come back and add to this as you develop your lessons. And then number 9, how are students going to use technology to advance their learning? So somewhere in this unit, we want the students using, accessing, or being involved with the use of technology. Everybody in the course has completed CRI 710, which looks at information literacy. I would love to see if there's a way, and if it's applicable, for you to work any information literacy into your unit. Now, some units don't lend themselves as well, but think about what technology are going to be used to enhance the instruction. And especially here, it asks, how will the students use the technology? As teachers, we use technology all the time, but how will the students use the technology within this unit? Okay. Number 10 is just to ensure student engagement. What are some of the things that you need to consider in your instructional environment? So to keep your students engaged in this topic, what are some things should you take into consider their cultural background? And again, you can pull from your Module A, your context for teaching and learning. You can pull from what you already know about your students, your class, to kind of give some ideas here. How are you going to keep your students engaged in this unit, in this topic, as they meet their goals and as they work towards the goals of the units? Generally for number 11, this one comes back with a lot of questions. What are some instructional strategies that will be used in this lesson series? How might these strategies promote student learning? So what are some of the tools? What are some of the teaching strategies that you're going to use to get your students to where they need to go in the understanding of the concept or the skills or the topics for this unit? So if you know you're going to be doing some group work or some response work, you might be doing some acted out or some you might have them do some different types of role play. So just kind of depending on what you're envisioning for the unit. And again, you can come back and change this as you develop your lessons. Number 12 here, make sure that you're focusing in on your focus students. So now that you have this idea for your unit and what you're going to do, how are you going to work with your focus students? What are things that are specific to their learning needs that you may need to focus on? So for example, if you are using technology, can all of your students access that technology? Are any of your students need special consideration when using technology or other parts? If you're using informational text as a part of this unit, which is really big in the Common Core state standards, can your students access the informational text that you're using? 13 is focusing on what ELD consideration do you need to make sure? And that kind of ties into 12. So these are taking, both 12 and 13 are taking a look at your focus students. How are you going to support them specifically in this unit? And in the end, that will come out in how you're differentiating the unit. How are you supporting all your students? Any other considerations? If there's considerations on time or materials that you're trying to get a hold of, any of that can be put right here. So this is C2. It's really an outline of your unit, thinking through what your objectives are. First of all, what your content standards are, including the Common Core State Standards that would align with the topics that you're doing are the Common Core State Standards. What are your learning objectives? How are you going to communicate those? What entry-level assessment you're going to give? What summative assessment are you thinking about giving? And then how you're going to support your students. So all the way from 5 on, it's really looking at how am I going to support my students in being successful. If you have any questions on C2, you can always talk with your support provider. They're very familiar with this document and this process, or you can always contact me. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.